Today I'm going to talk about non-destructive editing, adjustment layers, and layer masks. And we're going to talk about the basic reasons that photographers need to edit their photos in Photoshop. The first thing I want to talk about is exposure. Exposure is the amount of light your camera lets hit the sensor. So the amount of light needed to take the picture. When your camera is deciding how much light is needed to take a photograph, it figures this based on something called 18% or middle gray. Your camera tries to make everything in the image average out to middle gray. And this typically does a great job of giving you the right amount of light for a photograph. However, sometimes your camera is wrong. Sometimes your camera is wrong, especially if there is a lot of white in the photo. So right here in this photo, you can see that there is a paper. A large percentage of the photo is made up of paper. That is tricking your camera into letting in less light, because the average of this photo, it averages very light. But your camera doesn't know that. It wants it to be middle gray. It wants everything to be average. Therefore, we get this photo that is kind of dull, it's muddy, there's not a lot of bright whites in it. So this is why we need to edit our photo. We go back to our notes. Non-destructive editing is editing or changing photos without damaging the pixels or destroying data. We always want to try to do non-destructive editing. We don't want to damage our pixels. We want to get the best resolution, highest quality picture we possibly can. And here I talk about the 18% gray is the way the camera determines exposure. The camera tries to make everything average to middle or 18% gray. However, this can result in either in under or overexposed photos. Exposure, the light, the amount of light your camera lets hit the sensor. Overexposed is when there is too much light in your photograph. Underexposed is when there is not enough light in your photograph. So now let's go in and look at our photo in Photoshop. Would you say this photo is underexposed or overexposed? This photo is underexposed. It does not have enough light. That is because the camera was confused and it did not let in enough light to give it proper exposure. To change this, we're going to use the adjustment layer panel. If you look right here, it says adjustments. Today we're going to be introduced to the brightness contrast. This one right here. It's half black, half white symbol. When I click on this, now I have sliders that I can adjust my brightness and my contrast. I also want you to look down here in the layers panel. Very important. The layers panel shows you all the adjustments that are happening in your photo. Here I have my background image layer. This is the image I started with. And on top of it, I have my adjustment layer. Now, we already know this means brightness contrast because it has the half black, half white sun. I want you to draw that in your notes so you don't forget. Next to it, there's this big white rectangle. This big white rectangle is your layer mask. We can turn it on or off. So that means we can turn the adjustment on or off. So this is an adjustment layer. This is your brightness contrast adjustment. And this is a layer mask. We click back to our notes. Layer mask. Now I want you to remember this. White reveals, black conceals. That just means when your layer mask is white, the layer mask will show the adjustment on the entire photo. If the layer mask is black, it conceals that adjustment from the entire photo. Let me show you what that looks like. If I go here, I click on my layer mask, and I hit Command-I on my keyboard, it made the whole entire mask black. I'm going to turn it back white. Now I'm going to come up to my sliders, and I'm going to make an adjustment. I'm going to adjust the brightness and adjust the contrast. Now I have back my bright paper the way it should be. If I go down here, I see that my white layer mask is revealing my adjustment. I'm going to do Command I, and now I have turned off or turned black that adjustment layer. It's not showing my adjustment on the whole picture. I'm going to turn it back on, Command I. I can also turn off that adjustment layer right here with the eyeball. See how when I click on that, it comes on and off. Now up here, these are my adjustment sliders. You can change these values back to 0 just by typing in the number. I'm going to show you a muddy picture has low contrast. So a very low contrast underexposed picture, this is muddy. This happens when there's not enough light in the scene to take the picture. This can happen when there's a lot of white in the scene and your camera misinterprets it. This happens a lot when you're photographing weddings and the bride is wearing a big white long dress. You can often get muddy images if you rely on your camera sensor for exposure. Opposite of muddy is contrasty. Too much contrast. I think this looks like an Instagram filter. Your colors are too saturated, and it's definitely not appealing. This is very unappealing, especially for portraits. This is contrasty. If we go back to our notes, you can see muddy is low contrast, underexposed, and dull. Contrast is the difference between lights and darks. Contrasty is too much contrast, not enough midtones. So it's important to have bright whites, dark blacks, and plenty of midtones in your photograph. So here I want to adjust my image so that it has contrast and it's nice and bright like a white piece of paper. That is a good edit. So you have muddy, not enough contrast, contrasty, too much contrast, and then you have a good edit that gives you an accurate view of what that photo should look like. That's adjustment layers. That's everything that we went over in class. In the next lesson, we're going to talk about doing file save as and how you're going to edit 4 pictures with your contrast brightness adjustment layer.